Jiwoo had been on planet Vrakon for exactly 3 days when she noticed the eyes watching her. They were large and golden, with vertical pupils that narrowed in the bright morning light. She counted 6 pairs of them, all pressed against the thick glass of her habitat module, all focused on her with an intensity that made her nervous. She sat at her small desk near the window, trying to ignore them. The habitat was comfortable enough, with white walls, a narrow bed, and equipment for her research. The Galactic Council had sent her here as a xenobiologist, tasked with studying the planet's dominant species. The Vraks were massive creatures standing over 8 feet tall, covered in thick fur with patterns like Earth's tigers, and equipped with claws that could slice through metal. They were apex predators, feared across 3 star systems, and right now their children were watching her brush her hair. Jiwoo had woken up early, as she always did. Her routine was simple and familiar. She would make tea, eat a small breakfast, and then sit by the window to brush her hair. It was long and black, falling past her shoulders, and she had always found the ritual calming. Back on Earth, it had been a peaceful way to start the day. Here on Vrakon, it had apparently become entertainment. The cubs pressed closer to the glass. Their small paws left marks on the surface. They made soft, chirping sounds, nothing like the deep growls of the adult Vraks she had seen from a distance. These young ones were curious, tilting their heads as Jiwoo pulled the brush through her hair in long, steady strokes. She had arrived with a team of 5 humans. Taiho was the mission leader, a calm man with years of diplomatic experience. Hana handled communications and cultural analysis. Wu Jin managed their supplies and equipment. Minji was the medical officer, and Jiwoo studied animals. That was her job, her passion. She had spent years learning about creatures from dozens of worlds, but nothing had prepared her for the Vraks. The initial meeting with the adults had been tense. The Vrak matriarch, a scarred female named Thressa, had circled the humans slowly, her tail lashing. Her pack stood behind her, ready to attack at any sign of threat. Taeho had stood perfectly still, hands visible and empty, while Hana spoke through the translation device. They had come in peace, they said. They wanted to learn, to understand, to build friendship between their species. Thressa had allowed them to stay, but only in the habitat modules. The humans could observe from a distance. They could take notes and recordings, but they were not to approach the Vraks without permission. It was a fragile arrangement, one that could break with a single wrong move. Jiwoo continued brushing, working through a small tangle near the ends. The cubs outside made more chirping sounds. One of them, slightly larger than the others, pressed its nose against the glass so hard that its breath fogged the surface. Another stood on its hind legs, trying to get a better view. What were they looking at? Jiwoo paused and studied them back. They were young, maybe equivalent to human toddlers based on their size and behavior. Their fur was softer than the adults, with less defined stripes. Their claws were still small, not yet the deadly weapons they would become. But their eyes held intelligence. They were not just watching. They were studying her, just as she studied them. She lifted the brush again and pulled it through her hair slowly. All 6 cubs leaned forward in unison. She did it again. They leaned closer. A small smile crossed her face. They were fascinated by such a simple thing. Taeho entered the room behind her, carrying 2 cups of tea. He stopped when he saw the audience at the window. "They're back again," he said quietly. "They've been there for 20 minutes, Jiwoo replied. She accepted the tea with a grateful nod. "I think they like watching me brush my hair." "Strange thing to be interested in," Taeho said, but his tone was thoughtful. He was always looking for bridges, ways to connect with other species. "Have you seen them do anything similar? Grooming behaviors?" Jiwoo shook her head. The adults licked their fur like cats on Earth, but I haven't seen them use anything like a brush. They have claws, but those are for hunting and fighting, not delicate work. Maybe that's why they're watching, Tejo suggested. He sipped his tea, eyes on the cubs. They're seeing something completely new, a different way of caring for oneself. One of the smaller cubs pawed at the glass, trying to touch what it was seeing. Its sibling pushed it aside, wanting a better spot. A small squabble broke out, all chirps and tiny growls, but they quickly settled back to watching. Jiwoo set down her brush and picked up her tea. The cub's eyes followed her every movement. She took a drink, and they tilted their heads again, perfectly synchronized. It was almost comical, this pack of future apex predators acting like curious kittens. "I should document this," Jiwoo said. She reached for her tablet, but Tejo stopped her. "Let's not overwhelm them with technology yet," he said. "Just observe naturally for now. Build trust, slowly." Jiwoo nodded. He was right. The Vraks were cautious, and any sudden action could be seen as threatening. She returned to her tea and her morning routine, aware of the golden eyes that tracked her every gesture. The cubs stayed for another hour. They watched as Jiwoo cleaned her desk, as she reviewed her notes, as she stretched and prepared for the day's work. Only when the twin suns climbed higher in the purple sky did they finally leave, bounding off into the thick forest that surrounded the human settlement. But Jiwoo knew they would be back. Something about her simple routine had captured their attention, had sparked their curiosity. And in that curiosity, she saw an opportunity. Not just for research, but for something more important. These cubs did not see her as a threat or an outsider. They saw her as something interesting, something worth watching and learning from. It was a small beginning, but Jiwoo had learned that small beginnings often led to great things. She smiled as she watched the last cub disappear into the trees, its striped tail swishing behind it. Tomorrow morning she would brush her hair again, and she suspected her audience would return, ready to watch and wonder at the strange human with her strange human ways. The cubs returned the next morning, just as Jiwoo had expected, but this time they brought something with them. Each cub carried a stick in its mouth, thin branches from the forest trees. They dropped the sticks on the ground and pressed against the glass again, watching and waiting. Jiwoo smiled. They had seen her holding the brush. Now they wanted to try it themselves. She picked up her hairbrush and held it up so they could see it clearly. The cubs chirped excitedly, pawing at their own sticks on the ground. She began her routine, pulling the brush through her hair with slow, deliberate movements. The cubs watched for several minutes, their golden eyes locked on her hands. Then, as if receiving a silent signal, they all picked up their sticks again. What happened next made Jiwoo stop mid-brush. The largest cub, the one she had started thinking of as the leader, sat down and curled its long striped tail around its body. It held the stick awkwardly in its paw, trying to mimic the grip Jiwoo used. Then it pressed the stick against its tail and pulled. The stick caught in the thick fur immediately. The cub pulled harder. The fur bunched and tangled. The cub made a confused sound and pulled even harder. "Oh no," Jiwoo whispered. The other cubs were having similar problems. One scraped the stick down its tail so roughly that it yelped in pain. Another got the stick completely stuck in its fur and couldn't pull it out. A third tried using its claws instead of a stick, which only made things worse as the sharp points caught and twisted the long hairs. Within minutes, all 6 cubs had created disaster on their tails. Knots formed in the thick fur, pulling tight and uncomfortable. The cubs began to panic, chirping loudly and pawing at their tails. They rolled on the ground, trying to undo the tangles. They bit at the knots, which only added saliva to the mess. Jiwoo stood up, alarmed. This was not what she had intended. The cubs were hurting themselves, and their distress calls were growing louder. "Tejo!" she called out. We have a problem! The mission leader came running, along with Hana and Wu Jin. They crowded at the window, staring at the chaos outside. The cubs were now crying, proper tears running down their furry faces as they struggled with their hopelessly tangled tails. "What happened?" Hana asked. "They tried to copy me," Jiwoo said, her heart sinking. "They were watching me brush my hair, and they wanted to do the same thing to their tails, but they don't know how. They just made it worse." The cubs' cries grew louder, more desperate, and then from the forest came an answering sound, a deep rumbling roar that made the ground vibrate, then another roar and another. The adult Vraks had heard their children in distress. "This is bad," Taeho said quietly. "This is very bad." 3 massive Vraks burst from the forest line, running at full speed toward the crying cubs. Thressa was in the lead, her lips pulled back to show teeth as long as human fingers. Behind her came 2 males, both scarred from battles, both ready to destroy whatever was threatening their young. The cubs ran to the adults, still crying, their tangled tails dragging behind them. They pressed against their parents, showing them the knots, trying to explain what had happened. But all the adult Vraks understood was that their children were hurt and distressed. Thressa's head snapped toward the habitat module. Her eyes found Jiwoo through the glass. For a moment, their gazes locked. Jiwoo saw fury in those golden eyes and intelligence and a question. "Did you do this?" "We need to do something," Jiwoo said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "We need to help them." "We can't go out there," Wu Jin said firmly. "They'll kill us. Look at them. They think we hurt their cubs." "But we didn't," Jiwoo insisted. "The cubs hurt themselves trying to be like me. We have to fix this." Taeho was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The Vraks outside were circling now, examining their cubs, trying to understand the problem. One of the males tried to bite through a knot in his cub's tail, but the cub yelped in pain and pulled away. "Hana," Taeho said finally. "Can you communicate with them through the device?" Hana nodded and activated the translation collar they had been given by the Galactic Council. She spoke into it clearly. "Thressa, your cubs are not hurt by us. They tried to copy our grooming. They made knots in their tails. We can help fix it. Please let us help." The translation device projected the message in the Vrak language, a series of growls and chirps. Thressa's ears flicked toward the sound. She approached the habitat slowly, suspiciously. Her claws left deep marks in the ground with each step. She stopped at the glass and stared at Jiwoo again. This time, Jiwoo did not look away. She held up her hairbrush, then pantomimed, brushing it gently through her hair. Then she pointed at the cubs and their tangled tails. Thressa's eyes narrowed. She turned to look at her cubs, then back at Jiwoo. Understanding seemed to dawn slowly. Her cubs had been watching this human, had tried to copy her, had failed because they did not understand the gentle technique required. Jiwoo made a decision. Before anyone could stop her, she walked to the habitat door. Taeho grabbed her arm. "Don't," he said. "It's too dangerous." "Those cubs are suffering," Jiwoo replied. "And it's because of me, because they watched me. I have to fix this." She pulled free and opened the door. The morning air of Vrakon hit her face, warm and smelling of unfamiliar flowers. She took 3 steps outside, still holding her hairbrush, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Thressa growled, low and threatening. The 2 males flanked her, ready to attack, but Jiwoo kept walking slowly toward the cubs. She knelt down on the ground, making herself small and non-threatening. The largest cub, the leader, looked at her with hope in its golden eyes. Jiwoo held out her hand slowly. The cub sniffed it, then pressed its nose against her palm. Up close, she could see how badly tangled its tail was, with multiple knots pulling the skin tight. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Let me help." She reached for the tail gently. The cub tensed but did not pull away. Ji-woo began working on the knots with her fingers, separating the hairs carefully, finding the center of each tangle and working it loose. It was slow work, requiring patience and a soft touch. The cub relaxed. Its chirping changed from distress to something softer, almost like purring. Ji-woo picked up her brush and used it gently, working through the loosened fur with careful strokes. The other cubs watched. The adult Vraks watched. Everyone watched as this small human untangled what the cubs had destroyed. It took 30 minutes to fix the first tail. When Ji-woo finished, the large cub spun around, looking at its tail in wonder. The fur was smooth again, brushed and flowing. The cub made a happy sound and rubbed against Ji-woo's side, nearly knocking her over. The other cubs surged forward, all wanting their turn. And Ji-woo, smiling despite her fear, began untangling them one by one while their parents watched in amazement. By midday, Ji-woo had untangled all 6 cubs. Her arms ached from the work, and her knees hurt from kneeling on the hard ground. But every tail was smooth and brushed, and every cub was happy. They bounced around her, chirping and rubbing their heads against her legs, treating her like she was one of their pack. Thressa had watched the entire process without moving. Her golden eyes had tracked every movement Ji-woo made, every gentle stroke of the brush, every patient moment spent fixing what the cubs had broken. The 2 male Vraks had relaxed their aggressive stances, though they still watched carefully. Now the matriarch stepped forward. She was even larger up close, her shoulder reaching well above Ji-woo's head. Her breath was warm and smelled like meat. One swipe of her paw could end Ji-woo's life instantly. But when Thressa lowered her massive head and sniffed Ji-woo's hair, the gesture felt almost gentle. The translation device on Hana's collar crackled to life. Thressa was speaking, and the device converted her growls into words. You fixed what they broke. You did not harm them for their foolishness. You showed patience. Ji-woo swallowed hard. They were just trying to learn. They saw me doing something and wanted to try it themselves. That's natural. That's good. They are cubs, Thressa said. They are curious about everything. Usually their curiosity gets them into small troubles. Today they learned something valuable. Gentleness has its place. One of the male Vraks, his fur marked with old scars, moved closer. He studied Ji-woo for a long moment, then spoke. The translator rendered his words. Your grooming tool. It works better than claws or teeth, but our cubs do not have hands like yours. How can they learn this? It was a fair question. Ji-woo looked at the brush in her hand, then at the cub's paws. They had 4 digits with retractable claws. Similar to earth cats, but larger and more flexible. They could grip things, but not with the same precision as human hands. May I try something? Ji-woo asked, looking up at Thressa. The matriarch considered for a moment, then nodded once. Ji-woo called back to the habitat. Woo-jin, can you bring me the supply kit? The one with different tools? Woo-jin appeared at the door, hesitant. Tae-ho stood behind him, ready to pull him back if needed. But Woo-jin was brave. He carried the kit out slowly, placed it on the ground near Ji-woo, then retreated quickly. Ji-woo opened the kit and pulled out several items. She had combs of different sizes, brushes with various bristle types, and even some soft cloths. She spread them on the ground and let the cubs investigate. They sniffed everything, pawed at the items, picked them up in their mouths. The leader cub, the one she had helped first, picked up a wide-toothed comb. It held the handle in its mouth and tried to brush its tail again. The result was better than before, but still awkward. The comb kept slipping from its grip. Not like that, Ji-woo said softly. She took the comb and showed the cub how to hold it in its paw, using the digits to grip the handle. See? Hold it here. Then move it slowly like this. Not hard. Gentle, always gentle. The cub tried again, this time holding the comb in its paw. Its grip was clumsy, but it worked. The comb moved through its tail fur, catching slightly but not creating knots. The cub's eyes widened with excitement. It made a happy chirp and kept brushing, slow and careful. The other cubs crowded around, all wanting to learn. Jiwoo spent the next hour teaching them, showing each cub how to hold different tools, how to angle them correctly, how to work through their thick fur without pulling or tangling. She demonstrated on her own hair first, then let them try on themselves, correcting their technique when needed. Thressa sat nearby, watching everything. The two males watched too, and from the habitat, Jiwoo knew her teammates were recording every moment. "This is incredible." Hana's voice came through the translator, speaking to Taiho but loud enough for Jiwoo to hear. "They're learning so fast, and they actually want to learn from her." Taiho's response was thoughtful. She's not threatening. She's not trying to dominate or control. She's just sharing something useful. That's the kind of exchange that builds trust. One of the smaller cubs, a female with particularly fluffy fur, brought Jiwoo a brush and laid down beside her. She rolled over, exposing her belly, then pointed with one paw at her chest fur. Jiwoo understood. The cub wanted help with a spot she could not reach easily. "Of course," Jiwoo said. She brushed the cub's chest fur gently, working through small tangles. The cub purred, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through the ground. The other cubs saw this and immediately wanted the same treatment. Soon Jiwoo was surrounded by cubs, all waiting their turn to be groomed by the strange human who had such patient hands. Thressa made a sound, something between a growl and a laugh. "They have decided you are a grooming elder," she said through the translator. "That is a position of respect in our culture. Elders teach the young. Elders show patience when cubs are foolish. Elders fix what is broken." Jiwoo felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'm honored," she said, and meant it. The scarred male spoke again. "What do you call this practice? This gentle touching to clean and arrange fur?" "Grooming," Jiwoo said, "or brushing. It's how many species on my world care for themselves. We don't have thick fur like you, but we have hair. We keep it clean and untangled because it feels good and looks nice." "Feels good," the male repeated. He looked at his own tail, matted in places from battles and hard living. "I have never thought fur could feel good. It is just there." Jiwoo had an idea. It was bold, maybe too bold, but the moment felt right. "Would you like me to try? Brushing your tail? Just to show you what I mean?" The male looked at Thressa. The matriarch studied Jiwoo for a long moment, then gave a small nod. The male sat down and extended his massive tail toward Jiwoo. Up close, she could see old scars beneath the fur, places where the hair grew in white instead of striped. She selected a strong brush and began working on his tail. The fur was coarser than the cub's, thicker and more tangled from years of neglect. She worked slowly, careful not to pull, finding each knot and working it loose with her fingers before brushing. The male's breathing changed. He relaxed, his massive shoulders dropping, his eyes half closed. After several minutes, he made a sound Jiwoo had never heard from a Vrak before, something soft and almost vulnerable. "This is," he started, then seemed unable to find words. "I did not know fur could feel this way. Light, soft. Not pulling." The cubs stopped their own grooming to watch. They saw their father, a scarred warrior, relaxing under the gentle touch of the small human. They saw that strength did not mean you could not enjoy gentle things. When Jiwoo finished, the male's tail looked completely different. It was smooth and shining, the stripes clear and beautiful. He turned to look at it, moving it back and forth, feeling how easily it flowed. "Remarkable," he said simply. Thressa stood and approached. She did not ask, but she sat down beside Jiwoo and extended her own tail. It was a gesture of incredible trust. The matriarch of the pack, the most dangerous vrak in the territory, was allowing this human to touch her. Ji-Woo's hands were shaking slightly as she began brushing Thressa's tail, but her technique was sure, her movements practiced. She had done this enough now to feel confident, and Thressa's fur, while thick, was better maintained than the male's had been. "Your cubs are brave," Ji-Woo said quietly as she worked, "trying new things even when they don't understand them. That's how learning happens." "They get their bravery from their pack," Thressa replied, "but they learn gentleness from you. That is not something we teach well. We are hunters, fighters. We survive by being strong and fierce. But this—" She paused as Ji-Woo worked through a tangle. "This is a different kind of strength. The strength to be patient, to be soft when softness is needed." Ji-Woo finished brushing and sat back. All 3 adult vraks now had groomed tails, and all 6 cubs were practicing with their tools. The clearing had transformed from a place of panic and distress into something peaceful, almost domestic. Taeho's voice came through the translator again. "Ji-Woo, you should come back inside. Rest. You've been out there for hours." But Ji-Woo looked at the cubs, at their eager faces, at how they were helping each other learn the correct techniques. She looked at Thressa, who was examining her own tail with something like wonder. "Not yet," Ji-Woo said. "We're not finished learning yet." 3 weeks passed, 3 weeks of morning grooming sessions, 3 weeks of cubs arriving at dawn with their brushes and combs clutched in their paws. 3 weeks of watching apex predators learn the art of gentleness. The change in the vrak territory was visible. Adult vraks, who had once avoided the human settlement, now came to watch the lessons. They sat at a respectful distance, their golden eyes curious. Some brought their own cubs, younger ones who had not yet learned to walk properly, but who watched everything with wide eyes. Ji-Woo had become a familiar sight outside the habitat. She no longer felt fear when Thressa approached, or when the scarred male, who she had learned was named Crash, sat beside her for his daily grooming. The cubs followed her everywhere, a small parade of striped fur and swishing tails. Taeho documented everything. His reports to the Galactic Council were filled with observations about unexpected cultural exchange, about how a simple act of personal care had opened doors that diplomacy alone could not. Hana analyzed the social structure of the vraks, noting how grooming was becoming a bonding activity, something packs did together in the evenings. Woo-Jin had started making specialized brushes. He studied the vraks' paw structure and designed tools they could grip more easily. The vraks accepted these gifts with something approaching reverence, treating the brushes like precious possessions. Minji, the medical officer, noticed something else. The vraks who participated in regular grooming sessions had fewer skin infections and parasite problems. Their fur was healthier, their movements easier. Grooming was not just social, it was practical, but not everyone was happy with the changes. On the morning of the 22nd day, a new group of vraks arrived. They came from the Northern Territory, a different pack that had heard about the humans and their strange influence. Their leader was a massive male named Thorvik, even larger than Crash, with fur so dark it was almost black. His eyes held suspicion and anger. He approached the habitat during a grooming session. Ji-Woo was teaching the cubs how to braid small sections of tail fur, creating decorative patterns. The cubs loved this, competing to see who could make the most intricate designs. Thressa sat nearby watching with approval as her cubs learned fine motor control. Thorvik's roar split the peaceful morning. The cubs scattered, hiding behind their parents. Ji-Woo stood up quickly, her heart suddenly racing again. "This is wrong!" Thorvik's words came through the translator, harsh and loud. "You make our kind weak. We are hunters, predators. We do not sit like tame pets learning soft things from prey species." Thressa stood to face him. She was smaller than Thorvik, but her authority was clear. Watch your words, Thorvik. You are in my territory. These humans are under my protection. Your protection? Thorvik laughed, a bitter sound. You protect prey? You let them touch you? You let them teach your cubs to be gentle? Have you forgotten what we are? Crash moved to stand beside Thressa. Other vraks from her pack emerged from the forest, forming a defensive line. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Jiwoo knew she should retreat to the habitat. Taeho was gesturing frantically from the window, clearly ordering her to come inside. But the cubs were still scattered and scared, and she could see one of them, the smallest female, trembling behind a rock near Thorvik's group. "Please," Jiwoo said, stepping forward, "don't fight because of me. I meant no disrespect." Thorvik's eyes locked on her. "You are prey, small and weak. You have no claws, no fangs worth mentioning. Yet you dare to touch us, to change our ways." "I didn't try to change anything," Jiwoo said. Her voice was steady despite her fear. "Your cubs watched me do something I do every morning. They tried to copy me and got hurt. I helped them. That's all. Everything else happened because they chose it. Because your kind chose to learn something new." "Learning from prey makes us prey," Thorvik growled. Thressa's tail lashed. "No, learning makes us smarter, stronger. My cubs can now care for themselves better. My pack has fewer injuries from matted fur and parasites. We have learned a new skill and it costs us nothing. That is not weakness. That is adaptation." "It is corruption," Thorvik insisted. He took a step toward Jiwoo. "You should not be here. Your kind brings strange ideas." "Change is what has always been." The smallest cub, the one hiding near Thorvik's group, suddenly darted out. She ran to Jiwoo and pressed against her legs, trembling. Jiwoo put her hand on the cub's head protectively. Thorvik stared at them. "Even the cubs turn to prey for comfort now? This is exactly what I speak of. We lose our nature." "No," came a quiet voice. It was Crash. The scarred warrior stepped forward, his newly groomed tail flowing behind him. "We discover new parts of our nature. I have fought in many battles, Thorvik. I have killed to protect my pack. I will kill again if needed. But I have also learned that there is strength in choosing gentleness when gentleness serves. This human showed us that." "Pretty words from a warrior who lets prey touch him," Thorvik sneered. Crash's lips pulled back, showing his fangs. "You insult me. You insult my pack. You insult a teaching elder who has shown us only patience and kindness. If you wish to challenge, then challenge me, Thorvik. But leave the human and the cubs out of your anger." The two massive vraks faced each other. The air crackled with potential violence. Other vraks from Thorvik's pack moved forward, ready to support their leader. Thressa's pack did the same. What had started as a disagreement was about to become a territorial war. Jiwoo looked at the cubs, all of them frightened now. She looked at the adults, bristling and ready to fight, and she made a decision that was probably foolish, but felt necessary. She walked directly between Thorvik and Crash. "Stop," she said loudly. Both vraks looked down at her in surprise. "Stop this, please." "Move, human," Thorvik growled. "This does not concern you." "It absolutely concerns me," Jiwoo said. "You're fighting because of me. Because I brushed my hair and some cubs wanted to try the same thing. That's too stupid a reason for anyone to die." Thressa made a sound that might have been agreement or laughter. Jiwoo looked up at Thorvik. He was enormous, terrifying, and clearly ready to tear her apart. But she kept talking. "You think learning from me makes your kind weak? Then prove it. Let me try something. If it makes you weaker, I'll leave this planet. The whole team will leave. We'll never come back." "What do you propose?" Thorvik asked suspiciously. "Let me groom you. Your tail, your fur. Just like I've done for Thressa and Crash and the cubs. If it makes you weak or soft or less of a predator, then you're right. We shouldn't be here." But if it doesn't change who you are, if you're still fierce and strong and capable of protecting your pack after I'm done, then maybe being gentle sometimes doesn't make you weak at all." Thorvik stared at her. "You want to touch me? To use your tiny tools on my fur?" "Yes," Jiwoo said simply. The clearing was silent. Every Vrak watched, waiting to see what Thorvik would do. He could kill Jiwoo with one swipe. He could trigger the fight that was brewing. He could refuse and leave, maintaining his beliefs unchallenged. Instead, he sat down. "Fine," he said. "Show me this grooming. Show me what makes Thressa's pack abandon their pride." Jiwoo's hands were shaking as she picked up her brush. She walked around to Thorvik's tail. It was magnificent, long and thick, but also matted with burrs and tangled from hard living. She could see old wounds in his skin, places where fur grew in patches. She began to work. The clearing remained silent except for the sound of bristles moving through fur. Thorvik sat rigid, his muscles tense, clearly uncomfortable with this situation. But he did not move. He did not stop her. Jiwoo worked for over an hour. Thorvik's tail was the most challenging she had encountered. The knots were old and set deep. Her fingers grew sore from working them loose, but slowly, gradually, the tail transformed. The matted fur became smooth, the tangles released. The natural stripe pattern emerged, beautiful and striking. When she finished, she stepped back. "Done," she said quietly. Thorvik stood and turned to look at his tail. He moved it back and forth, feeling the difference. His pack members stared, clearly surprised by the transformation. "Well," Thressa asked, "do you feel weak, Thorvik? Has this human stolen your strength?" Thorvik was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his claws, long and sharp and deadly. He looked at them, then at his tail, then at Jiwoo. "I feel lighter," he admitted. "My tail moves easier. It does not pull or catch." He retracted his claws and looked at his paws. "But my claws are still sharp. My strength is unchanged. My desire to protect my pack is as strong as ever." He turned to face his pack. "She did not make me weak," he announced. "She made me more comfortable. These are not the same thing." One of his pack members, a younger female, spoke up. "May she teach us too?" Thorvik looked at Jiwoo for a long moment. "What you did is called grooming, yes?" Jiwoo nodded. "And you would teach any who wished to learn, even those who doubted you?" "Of course," Jiwoo said. "That's what teaching is, sharing knowledge with everyone who wants it." Thorvik's tail swished, smooth and flowing. "Then perhaps," he said slowly, "we have been wrong about many things. About prey and predators, about strength and gentleness, about humans." He turned to Thressa and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect. "Your pack is wise, matriarch, and this grooming elder, has earned her place among you." The tension broke like a snapped branch. Vraks from both packs relaxed. The cubs emerged from hiding, chirping happily, and Jiwoo, small and human and completely unprepared for this moment, found herself surrounded by apex predators who wanted to learn the gentle art of brushing their tails. 4 months had changed everything. Jiwoo stood at the edge of the clearing that had become known as the teaching ground. It was early morning, and the twin suns were just beginning to paint the purple sky with shades of orange and pink. Around her, Vraks of all ages were engaged in grooming sessions. Cubs practiced on each other, their technique much improved from those first chaotic attempts. Adults sat in comfortable groups, working on each other's fur with the specialized brushes Wu Jin had designed. Even elderly Vraks, who had initially been skeptical, now participated in the daily ritual. The transformation was remarkable. What had started as 6 curious cubs watching through glass had grown into a cultural shift that rippled through the entire Vrak population. 3 different packs now visited regularly, and word had spread to territories even farther away. Thressa approached, her tail swaying gracefully behind her. She had taken to wearing a small braid near the tip, a decoration she said reminded her of Jiwoo's patience. "The council arrives today," she said. Jiwoo nodded. The Galactic Council had requested a formal review of the human mission on Vrakon. They wanted to assess the changes, to determine if the human presence had been beneficial or disruptive. Jiwoo knew that their decision would affect not just her team, but potentially how other species approach the Vraks in the future. "Are you worried?" Thressa asked. "A little," Jiwoo admitted. "I never meant to change anything. I was just brushing my hair." Thressa made that sound that was almost laughter. The best changes often come from simple actions. "My cubs saw something interesting. They tried to copy it. You helped them when they failed. Everything else grew from those small moments." Taeho emerged from the habitat, carrying his formal diplomatic clothing. Over the past months, he had documented everything. His reports detailed not just the grooming practices, but the broader effects. Territorial disputes between packs had decreased. The Vraks were spending more time in peaceful social activities. Even hunting patterns had shifted, becoming more efficient as pack coordination improved through the bonding that grooming sessions created. "The council ship will land in 2 hours," Taeho said. "We should prepare the presentation." But Jiwoo looked at the Vraks in the clearing. The cubs were teaching new arrivals from a distant pack, demonstrating proper technique with the patience their elders had shown them. Adult Vraks sat in the morning sun, grooming and talking, their fierce nature not diminished, but balanced with moments of gentleness. "I don't think we need a presentation," Jiwoo said. "Let them see what's actually happening here." When the council representatives arrived, they were a mix of species. A tall Varinian with blue skin and multiple eyes, a crystalline shardborn that communicated through light pulses, a small Pixen whose fur changed colors with emotions. They descended from their ship in formal attire, prepared for diplomatic discussions and official assessments. What they found was Thorvik sitting calmly while a human named Minji worked on removing burrs from his shoulder fur. They saw Crash teaching a group of young Vraks how to help each other reach difficult spots. They saw cubs playing with brushes, turning grooming into games that taught them coordination and gentleness. The Vorinian representative stared. "This is unexpected." Thressa stepped forward. "You came to judge whether humans should remain on our world, yes?" "That is correct, matriarch," the Vorinian said. "We received reports of significant cultural disruption. The Vraks are known as fierce warriors, yet we hear they now practice grooming with prey species." "Humans are not prey," Thressa said firmly. "They are teachers. Specifically, that human is a teaching elder." She gestured to Jiwoo. "She showed us something valuable, and we chose to learn it. That is not disruption. That is growth." Thorvik approached, his massive form making even the tall Vorinian seem small. "I came here 4 months ago ready to drive the humans away," he said. "I believed they were making us soft. I was wrong. Learning to be gentle when gentleness serves does not make us less fierce when fierceness is needed. It makes us wiser about when to use each." The smallest cub, the one who had hidden behind Jiwoo during the confrontation, came running up. She was carrying a brush in her mouth. She dropped it at the Varinian's feet and chirped hopefully. "She wants to show you what she learned," Jiwoo translated with a smile. "She's very proud of her brushing technique." The cub demonstrated on her own tail, carefully working the brush through her fur with a grip that had taken weeks to perfect. Her movements were gentle but effective, her focus complete. When she finished, she looked up at the council representatives as if seeking approval. The shard-born pulsed colors rapidly, which the translator converted to speech. "Remarkable." The young one shows fine motor control and patience. These are not traits typically associated with this species. Because no one taught them before, Hana said. She had been standing nearby, recording data. The Vraks have always had the capacity for delicate work. They just never had a reason to develop it. Jiwoo gave them that reason by sharing something simple and personal. Taeho stepped forward. The changes go beyond just grooming. Pack violence has decreased 47%. Injury rates from territorial disputes are down. Social cohesion has increased. The Vraks are still fierce protectors of their lands, but they now have tools for peaceful interaction that they lacked before. The Pixan representative, whose fur had shifted to a thoughtful purple color, spoke in a squeaky voice. We have observed many first contacts. Most focus on technology exchange or resource agreements. But this is different. This is a cultural gift freely given and freely received. There is no trade imbalance here. Because grooming costs nothing, Jiwoo said. Everyone has fur or hair. Everyone can learn to care for it. I didn't bring some advanced technology or resource they needed. I just brushed my hair, and some cubs wanted to try it too. The Varinian watched as more Vraks gathered, curious about the visitors. He saw how the cubs stayed close to Jiwoo, how the adults treated her with respect, but not fear. He saw Woo Jin showing a young Vrak how to make a brush from local materials. He saw Minji checking a Vrak's skin health, explaining through the translator about proper fur care and parasite prevention. This is the most successful cross-species integration I have witnessed in 30 years of diplomatic service, the Varinian said finally. The humans have managed what we all struggle to achieve. They found common ground with a species considered violent and unapproachable, and they did it through an act of personal grooming. The Shardborn pulsed agreement. The Council will recommend permanent human presence on Vrakon. Furthermore, we would like to study this grooming exchange model for application with other species. Thressa growled, but it was a pleased sound. The humans may stay as long as they wish. They are part of our territory now, part of our pack. That evening, after the council representatives had left, Jiwoo sat in the teaching ground surrounded by Vraks. The cubs were settled for sleep, curled against their parents, their tails neatly brushed and braided. Adult Vraks sat in comfortable groups, engaging in the evening grooming sessions that had become tradition. Taeho sat beside Jiwoo. You've changed history, he said quietly. You realize that, right? The Vraks were isolated for generations because no one could find peaceful common ground with them. Now other species will follow what you started. I just brushed my hair, Jiwoo said, but she was smiling. You did more than that, Hana added. She was reviewing her notes, her eyes bright with excitement. You saw cubs in distress and helped them. You showed patience when it would have been easier to hide. You taught when you could have refused, and you treated apex predators with the same gentleness you'd show anyone. That's what changed everything. Woo Jin came over carrying a bundle of new brushes. The Northern Pack sent a request. They want to learn too. And there's a pack from the Eastern Mountains asking about grooming techniques. Word is spreading fast. We'll need to train more humans, Minji said. We can't handle all the requests with just our team. The Galactic Council is already sending volunteers, Taeho said. Scientists, cultural specialists, even some military personnel who want to learn non-violent interaction methods. Vrakon is about to become a training ground for interspecies cooperation. Jiwoo looked at the cubs sleeping peacefully. She remembered that first morning, watching their curious golden eyes through the glass. She remembered their failed attempts to copy her, the knots in their tails, their tears of frustration. And she remembered the moment she decided to step outside and help, not knowing if she would survive, but knowing she had to try. Thressa settled beside her, her massive form somehow gentle in its movements. What are you thinking, teaching elder? I'm thinking about how strange life is, Jiwoo said. I came here to study you, to observe and document and write reports. Instead, I ended up changing your culture and having you change mine. We learned from each other. That is what teaching should be, Thressa said. Not one-sided, not about one being superior. True teaching is exchange. You showed us grooming. We showed you that fierceness and gentleness can exist together. Both lessons are valuable. A shooting star crossed the purple sky. The twin moons were rising, casting silver light across the clearing. In the distance, Jiwoo could hear other vraks settling for the night, their sounds peaceful rather than threatening. My cubs ask me to tell them the story, Thressa said. The story of the human who brushed her hair and changed everything. They like hearing about their own foolishness, about the knots in their tails. They laugh at themselves now. That is also new. We were too proud before to laugh at our mistakes. I'll have to tell my family back on Earth, Jiwoo said. They'll never believe that brushing my hair became a diplomatic incident. And a diplomatic triumph, Taeho corrected. Don't undersell what you've accomplished. But Jiwoo knew she hadn't accomplished anything alone. The cubs had been brave enough to try something new. Thressa had been wise enough to let Jiwoo help them. Crash had been open-minded enough to receive grooming. Thorvik had been strong enough to admit he was wrong. And countless vraks had chosen to learn rather than reject what was unfamiliar. As the night deepened and the vraks slept, Jiwoo made her way back to the habitat. But she knew that tomorrow morning she would be back in the teaching ground. The cubs would arrive at dawn with their brushes. New vraks would come seeking to learn, and she would teach them, one gentle stroke at a time, that caring for oneself and others was not a sign of weakness, but a different kind of strength. She paused at the door and looked back. In the moonlight, she could see the peaceful forms of sleeping vraks, their tails brushed smooth and flowing. And she smiled, knowing that sometimes the smallest actions, the simplest routines, could create ripples that changed worlds. The predator cubs had watched her brush her hair. They had tried and failed and learned. And in that learning, they had discovered something precious, that being fierce did not mean you could never be gentle, and that gentleness toward oneself and others was perhaps the greatest strength of all.